Hello and welcome back to the channel. This is SuperCoach Challenges, and tonight we're going to be looking through the round 9 teams and how they've shaped up so far with the lineups being released tonight. Um, Not much too interesting. There are some changes that might have a little bit of an effect on some people's teams, but for the most part, most of us should be good and ready to go. So, looking first at Richmond versus Geelong, not much has changed here, unless you have Patrick Dangerfield. Some people did have Judson Clark, who has been omitted, so that would hurt you if you decided to bring him in. And Dangerfield obviously is injured, and otherwise Close is suspended, and I don't really think Cumberland was in many teams. And we've seen Trent Cotchin and Parfitt come in. Looking at the lineups, quite the same as most other weeks. I guess the good news is that Baker has been named on a half back line, which would be very nice for most of those owners. And we're also seeing Short being named in the midfield, and Samson Ryan is named as follower. Sadly for Samson Ryan holders, once again, we're not going to get that sole right position with Ben Miller still in the team. As we saw last week, Samson showed he can score quite well, even with Miller in the team, and hopefully he can continue to do that going forward. Looking at Geelong, I guess this could be a big game for Tom Hawkins and Jeremy Cameron. Richmond's defence hasn't necessarily stood up to big forwards as much the previous weeks. I think the Melbourne game was maybe a bit of an example of that, with a guy like Van Rooyen able to steal the game at the end. So they could be big scorers if you had them in your team. Otherwise, the midfield's a bit interesting. I think that Mitch Nevitt's a quite interesting pickup for most teams. He's 160k. A lot of people went on Simpson last week, so there's no reason you couldn't go on Nevitt. He seems to have his job security locked in. Like, if you look at the emergencies, there's not much there for plays that would really take his spot. I think Dangerfield's probably at least 3 to 4 away. Quite a few other players who got quite long on their injury time still to go, and I think he's got enough to hopefully get us to that through the bye or to his bye at least, where he can be flipped and score some good points. Also looking at this, Tom Stewart looks like he could be a very nice VC for this game. His last score, I think, against Richmond was 160. And with Richmond's mid forward line or team itself having been a little bit down compared to previous years, this could be another big one for him, especially with Tim Taranto, who normally has been just bombing it in. It could be quite good for him. So kind of keep that one in mind. Moving on to the Gold Coast West Coast game. For a lot of us holders, it would be very disappointing not to see that with the changes and the players that are out, that we have not been able to get young Charlie Constable into the team. He's been absolutely destroying it in the VFL, so I don't know why he can't get a game. But we will see Uega, I'm going to go with Mac Andrew and Sam Day come in instead. See Ben Long out. You thought that might have been a Charlie Constable in, but not to be. Interestingly, I know Rory Atkins is named on the bench. So he's been a bit of an interesting ad for a lot of teams at 200k. With Ben Long out, it's probably helped his job security a little bit, but I'm not sure how long that injury is going to be. Otherwise, we're not even seeing Constable on the emergencies, which is a bit flattening. Thomas Berry getting another game. Will he be able to hold going further? We're a little bit unsure, but I guess that's a question for next week. Otherwise, staying pretty unchanged here. This is the second game on the Friday night. I think there was a bit of talk that Noah Anderson may be going to cop a little bit of a tag, or they're going to try to tag him with Jinby. So might be one to stay away from if you're going to VC him. Maybe even rethink it to trade him. But I think He has been showing quite good form recently. It's just a bit annoying. These first 3 games were a bit down. For West Coast, I mean, they've got so many injuries. Pretty flattening for them. It's interesting that Campbell Chesser couldn't get into this side, even though he's supposedly back. So for those who held him through the injury, bit flattening for you. Otherwise, Brady Hugh, Callum Jamison, and Harry Edwards are back into the team. He's hoping that we get a Noah Long next week. The potential is there. This is probably a very good game for Jared Witts. He's probably going to have a huge scoring game with Bailey Williams, but otherwise probably not much here that's too relevant. If you have Jaden Hunt, that's potentially could be potentially good score for him with a running off the back line here. But otherwise, Oscar Allen actually could maybe kick a few goals. Sam Collins is a good defender though, and Gold Coast have actually looked quite good the past couple weeks. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see for them if this is even a decent game. I think a lot of people may tune out by the time this starts, but anyway, good to see West Coast and Gold Coast get a Friday night game. Moving down, so to the Sydney game, and we see Peter Laddams is out injured with Tom McCartan and Sheetha was omitted. So the first gamer was omitted, and we see Tom Hickey and Will Gould come in. Now, Will Gould, that's a very interesting player to have come in. He is on the bubble. We've been waiting for this guy for so long, and it looks like Sydney have decided to bring him in and wreck his scoring potential, playing him as a sub the first game, and I believe the second game maybe. I guess the issue with picking him up now is that how good is his job security? It's obvious that Sydney have really been slow with getting him into the team, and whether he's able to keep it once McCartan comes back or other players outside that come back will be interesting to see. Callum Mills is named on the ball. There's been a lot of talk about him and picking him up this year, so that's a nice one to keep an eye on. Otherwise, for Sydney, they lose a ruck, but they gain a ruck, and that's something for Sean Darcy. Those holders of Sean Darcy, it may be a week that you potentially look at jumping off and taking 100k and going to Max Gawn. There is a lot of talk that Gawn could get DPP, and he has 155 break even with Darcy. And before, when Laddams was out, it was, it probably was preferable to maybe keep Darcy because it's probably going to be a big score with no rup. But I think with Hickey, that kind of makes it hard. Darcy has quite a bad history against Sydney as well, also makes it hard. Maybe one you want to jump off. I mean, Fremantle have no other changes, which is a bit annoying. I was hoping that Sturt might be able to get it back into this team, but it looks like that Tracy was actually just a tactical sub rather than an injury sub last week, which is a bit annoying. Erasmus looks like he's locking in that position, and with Johnson to come back next week, it might be even harder for Sturt to get in. Fife is staying as the sub, which is... I'm not sure if it's the best position for him. Kind of sad that we're seeing a double, is it double Brownlow? I believe double Brownlow medalist kind of being, treated like this now. But, I mean, that's the way it gets at some point. And, you'd think Fremantle, with the way they've been playing, they might want to try and play their young guys a bit more, which is why maybe Fife isn't getting a big run. But, yeah, still flattening to see for them. Otherwise, Brayshaw, very low break even. This is probably a good test to see where he's actually at, because Sydney, I think, are probably pretty restrictive on scoring for midfielders especially. And if Mills gets put to him, it would be a pretty big test. But, Sarong's been playing very well, so it might well go to him instead. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in this game. I think if you are going to jump on Brayshaw, this is the week you have to do it based on break even, but I really don't like the Fremantle run of games coming up. So, and it's probably one of the harder back ends for the year, so maybe one to just miss out on. Going down to North v Port, so not much has changed here. Big one for North is Ben Cunnington being omitted, another old boy being omitted, not even shown in the emergencies, which is a bit flattening. I think there was a lot more wrong with North Melbourne than just Ben Cunnington. I think that this team is going to be in struggle town for quite a few couple years, I think. I mean, LDU looks like he's injured, so that's probably not helping. I mean, they really need Jerry to not get injured next year because Goldie, how many more years has he got? And then you look at the rest of the team, and it's hard to get excited about a lot of it because outside of LDU, yeah, it's a little, and Sheasel. There's that a lot of the players who are scoring well are the old guys, like Zeeble. And watching that game against St Kilda last week was a pretty hard watch. They're probably lucky they didn't get belted by more. And I can see guys like Zeeble and Sheasel continuing to score well just due to the way they play. Port Adelaide, on the other hand, have been looking very nice the past few weeks. I think some things have been dispelled regarding, how they've been playing. I think Jason Horne-Francis will be absolutely lapping this up. And I think I honestly think he's going to have a real nice back end to the year and remind everyone why he was a number one pick. He's slowly been building himself into this, and I think he'll really want to go out there and make a mark on North Melbourne. And I think it's going to be hard for North Melbourne to be too physical with him. I think that Port are quite a physical team themselves, and I think that guys like Dixon and Pepper and other guys around the ball aren't really going to take any crap from North Melbourne. And when the North are getting belted by probably quite a few points, they'll probably struggle as well. So moving on to the next game, we've got Hawthorn v Melbourne. Hawthorn have made quite a few changes here with Mackenzie, Giath, Blank, Bruce, and Butler into the team. McDonald's out with injury. Green is omitted. So if you have Green, you can probably definitely drop him. Surprisingly, Scrimshaw's been omitted. Been very surprising that he hasn't actually been a mainstay in this team recently. Just the way that he's played previous years, you think he's probably one of their better players, but I think a lot of people are thinking that Hawthorn are tanking without saying they're tanking to try and get Harley. I think they've been saying that, they only think, 15 of their players are are locked in, and the rest of them are still trying to fight for their position in the team, which is why so many changes are happening. But, it's hard to say, but when you're dropping guys like Jeff on road trips and stuff like that, saying it's a rest, it's kind of hard to see this as just being testing out players, but especially when it's a young player like that. But anyway, if you have Fergus Green, I'd be getting rid of him, getting the cash and upgrading some people. Otherwise, Brockman, if you have Brockman, I think not many people would have gone on him, but I'm a bit flattening with the suspension. And otherwise, the rest of the guys are probably not too relevant. Looking at Melbourne, so Spargo and Hibbert in. Turner, the first game was omitted, so I don't know if it's actually a first game, but first game of this year anyway, it was omitted. Harms has dropped to the sub, and James Jordan omitted. So I got a guy who's a great scorer for us previously has been omitted as well. And looking at the side, the Weddle has stuck in his position, so it can be one that you bring in. The hard bit about bringing in Weddle for me is that if you've got Seamus Mitchell, it's kind of hard to also bring in Weddle as well, because I think that either one of these two could get dropped. Like, you look at the amount of changes they made this week, they could both get dropped in 1 week, which then, really puts your back line in a bit of disarray with emergencies. And having people to, cover zeros, especially in the buys, because I'm just not sure that either of them really stick in. I don't know if Weddle's scoring potential is really that good to be wanting to get him in the team anyway. So, yeah, maybe just keep it, maybe one to skip, depending on your team. Have we passed the St Kilda game, by the way? No, not yet. Yeah, maybe one to just skip for now. And looking at Melbourne, I mean, not much to talk about here. Other than maybe Gorn, so there's a lot of talk about Gorn getting DPP. I think he's 38% forward, and you need 35. Be quite a good DPP player for us. A guy that some people could be looking to trade down Darcy to get to. In this challenge team, we're not really going to have that pivot action. Maybe we change the rule next year to say that you can actually adjust players, your premium players to other premium players, even if they aren't injured, if it's just, strategically, because taking that 100K would be nice. But it's also kind of a waste of the trade for this team. I think we just got to stick with Darcy for now. But if you don't, otherwise, I think Gorn could be very good to bring in. He scored quite well last week. Break even's back down. Probably the cheapest you're going to get him. So if you want him, jump on now. Then can be Sepa Clayton Oliver. You've got him 50K cheaper than what he was at the start of the year. The only thing I can say with Oliver is I just have a feeling that there could be a tag coming in this game. And that could affect his scoring. And even Port could put Drew to him. And then I think the next few games after that, there are tag potentials. He hasn't always scored massively against Hawthorn, but his break even is at 99. He just goes hundreds, this bloke, and if you want to get him, it's probably the time, because you probably won't see him much cheaper. In saying that, if the money can be used better elsewhere, maybe go with that, especially considering that, worst comes to worst, you might have to pay an extra 50K from here, whereas you could save 50K if he has another bad score. Hard one, because he's a captain option every week. But yeah, a decision you have to kind of make this week. Moving on to Brisbane v Essendon. So Zorko's back in, and looks like Ainsworth's been the omission, and Harry Sharp has actually kept his spot, which is quite interesting. I don't know if that will continue once he's out. Daniel Rich. Once Daniel Rich is back, I think Harry Sharp may lose his spot. But good to see he's kept it for Zorko. He's on the bubble next week. Not really sure we can actually even think about going him, but interesting nonetheless. McKenna's lining up on that back flank. P. Coleman isn't missing, so I guess his scoring potential kind of stays the same as it was last week, maybe a little bit less with Zorko lining up there. Otherwise, the decisions here are to trade out probably for most people Ashcroft, McKenna, or even Wilmot. Wilmot's got the least money on him. Ashcroft has the highest break even, but probably the highest scoring potential, and McKenna is the middle point of each. Probably going to come down to a lot of team structures. If you need a defender, you're probably going to keep McKenna. If you need the money, you're probably going to get rid of Ashcroft. And if you had the luxury, then you're going to probably get rid of Wilmot and get an extra premium on the field. So kind of your decision to be made there. Now, for Essendon, and probably one of the biggest outs of this week is Darcy Parish is injured. And this is kind of an injury that's come out of nowhere. And I think I was talking to someone in one of the comments, and I kind of mentioned this with Darcy Parish last year. His injuries kind of wrecked me, which is kind of why I've been a bit hesitant on picking him even this year. And it's funny how I made that comment last week, and we see Parish now gaining that injury. So a bit rough for anyone who kind of brought him in last week. He did have a good score, but it looks like to that person I was talking to that I think he was choosing out of Petrarca and Parish, that Petrarca was the right choice at this point. Otherwise, Jake Kelly out, and Jordan Ridley is also out injured. Kyle Langford being named on a halfback flank when he's been playing their main forward is pretty wild. I think this reads really badly for anyone who has Mason Redman. I just can't see him being able to do the rebounding as much. They're going to have to play him as a bigger defender, as they were with Ridley, who looks to be concussed. Whether he will be out for 1 or 2 weeks is there to be seen due to his history. Zach Merritt, he's got 130 break even, but Essendon have a really nice run after this. kind of makes it hard whether you pick him this week or pick him next week. I'd probably wait a week, especially with, I think that's kind of pushed forward even with Parish out, because now Brisbane aren't kind of picking between, do we, put effort into Parish or do we put effort into Merritt? They're probably just going to put effort into Merritt. And this could actually be really good for Setterfield holders, because the CBAs are going to be there and he's probably going to score big again. So probably a good one to look at. And I think we might be bringing him back in the team if we traded him out. I don't think we did. I think we weren't withering, so that's good for us. The next game is Carlton v the Dogs. So for Carlton, it's kind of interesting that they've signed the hammer, or the axe, sorry, and got rid of Brody Kemp, Kerno, and Honey. Now I think that Brody Kemp was actually playing quite well. And for those who were looking at bringing him in, well, there's no point now. Once again, being saved by the early omission on the second game. Kemp was scoring quite well. Probably one of those games was a bit skewed by the fact it was West Coast. Kerno, I'm not at all really surprised with the Kerno drop. I think his best footy's behind him. He's kind of being used as a bit of a tagger, and I think he could come back in against the Melbourne game, but for now he's going to be dropped as Carlton kind of try and rejig this midfield and figure out what they're doing. And Honey also omitted the Dogs. So obviously Treloar's out with that hammy injury, and they're bringing in a new player, James O'Donnell. Don't really know much about him, but hopefully he can score well and be a downgrade option. Interesting, there are quite a few nice known emergency known players in the emergency list for the Dogs, so not sure about the job security on young O'Donnell, but hopefully he can score well and maybe offer the potential of being picked up. The problem with the Bulldogs is I think a lot of us are going to have those round 15 buy players, and the Dogs are in the round 15, which kind of makes it hard to bring him in. Nevertheless, still an interesting downgrade option. And how many games we got left? 2 left. So Adelaide St Kilda. This is extended bench at the moment. For Adelaide, it's Himmelberg, Gallant, McHenry, and Parnell. I think Himmelberg's potential to come in to play a big defender. But otherwise, I probably, now looking at the extended bench is actually interesting, because has Parnell been put on field? Yes, Parnell's gone straight into that back pocket, which means that I'd say Crouch is not going to be playing. McHenry won't be playing. And looking at those names, it's probably Gallant and Himmelberg. So they're going to put Parnell. Parnell's going straight in for Nick Murray, which actually makes sense because St Kilda don't have that big a forward line. So this is actually fine. And then that means that Phil Thorpe, Rochelle, and Sloan with Michelini should play, unless they give Michelini a rest, which they could do. Looking at St Kilda, we've got Caminiti, Tom Campbell, and Zane Cordy in. The Tom Campbell one's actually a little bit scary, because what I can see happening is him coming in as a late change from Varro Marshall, so just keep an eye on that. Otherwise, Sinclair's playing his 150 game, so maybe he'll go for a big score. Did like playing the Crows last year, but it's a different Crows team this year. Caminiti straight into the team. The interchange is Gresham, Clark, Butler, Cordy, Bartel, Patton, Campbell, Sharman. So an interesting interchange. I'd say Clark's in, Butler is in, and probably Sharman based on last week's game with Gresham. Bit flattening, because I was hoping that Bartel might get a game. He actually has gone backwards in price due to the sub games he's been playing. He had an 8 last week, and his break even's up to 50, and his price is down to 130 from 150. So he could be a great downgrade option, but it doesn't look like St Kilda are going to give him a game, even with Well, it looks like they haven't had any injuries anyway, so looks like he's destined for another sub game. Ross seems to love playing him as sub. I don't think there's much to discuss here. I mean, like obviously, if you don't have Dawson, could be a good week. So got a 90 break even. Laird, wait another week. I think his break even's 149. So probably can wait another week on that. And then, I mean, Chase Jones Holders named on the half forward flank, but that's always where he's been named. You'll probably see him roll through the midfield a bit. The St Kilda, yeah, Stocker had a great game last week. Wish I still had him in my team, but I traded him. And if I traded Ridley, I would have got 100 from Stocker and not the 18 I ended up with Ridley and a nice price rise from Stocker. So that's probably a 100k swing, which is a bit annoying, but that's sometimes how the game pans out. And otherwise, it's kind of very much the same. Jack Steele, another interesting option. So I might do a video regarding Mills, Steele, and Brayshaw if I get the time. But I think that Steele has been a lot better than maybe the SuperCoach numbers have suggested. I think that last week he was a bit unlucky because the style of game really didn't match the style he plays, and he was played for a little bit. But he's I think obviously with Steele, he really needs the contested ball to be getting his scoring up. He loves tackles, and last week against North, there wasn't necessarily a lot of ball ups, a lot of stoppages. It was a lot of kick to kick into uncontested mark game, 240 uncontested mark, or not uncontested, just marks in general, which didn't help his game, and he was still able to score a 90. And I think a lot of people are overlooking. So when Steele was injured and when he was sore, he wasn't tackling, and the tackle numbers are back up. He had 7 tackles last week, 10 tackles the week before. You know, that shows he's. I feel like that his body's kind of going in the right direction, and St Kilda have a very nice run. And it's why I really like the Steele pick. And the only reason I'm not picking him is because I think maybe some other guys around that price have not got the injury so far this year and have shown that if they get the role, they are scoring a lot better. Steele's never not had the midfield role, but has had issues with scoring in the previous couple years. So interesting to see if he bounces back. He does have a little bit of a high break even, so you can wait a week. But I think we could see a big score here from him. And then on to the last game. So a bit of extended bench going on here. Toby Green back in for GWS. Karen Fleet in the new GWS play is also in. I believe he's debuting. But don't know 100%. That bench, anything. I mean, Perryman, Cadman probably playing. But then outside of that, it's a little bit of a mix. And then for Collingwood, yeah, I can't really see him. I think, Begg could play. I think he's a bit of a ruckman, isn't he? I mean, looking at the bench, it's probably Noble, Adams, Markov, and you'd have to say McCreary hasn't done much wrong either. So probably those 4, and the other 4 will see the emergency. Looking at a GWS side, nice to see Kelly, Boggs and Green all named in that midfield. Angwin has still kept his spot, which is nice even after a poorer game. This could be a nicer game for him to score in because I think it will be a little bit more free-flowing because Collingwood do like to play a bit of a free-flowing game. Could be a nice game for Nick Dacos to bounce back with because GWS with their coach, what's the coach's name? But he coached at, I forgot his name anyway. He coached at Richmond as an assistant coach. And what we know about Richmond is they like to just play a run and gun style where they use their system to just win. They don't really focus on tagging, and that could be something that GWS have kind of looked at a little bit this year. And I think that that's probably good for Nick Dacos, and hopefully he can have a bounce back game. Never like seeing a young player or such a good player. It doesn't matter if they're young or old. I mean, he hasn't even really gone through a slump. He had 27 last week. It's just not as the highs that we saw before, and I think he will bounce back. I think he likes the challenge, and it will be an interesting thing to see. So, in saying all of this, let's go to my team, the team now. So, if you look back, you probably remember that we did have not Bontempelli. We brought in Dunkley at the time. But I kind of changed my mind. The reason being that I think Tom Stewart has a really nice run coming up at Geelong's home ground, and I think that he could start sparking some massive scores. I also felt that with Wiedering coming out, we kind of just needed to cover the defensive position rather than a midfielder. And I kind of just, I don't know, I just like Stewart for his scoring potential, so I just decided to go with him. And that could be wrong, but we'll see what happens. As far as the rookies go, probably should trade Green out and bank some cash. But maybe that's a trade next week to Drury, assuming he gets a game, because that's 160k rather than probably 100 or so for Nevitt, who's probably my preferred player this week, just because of his role and his previous scoring potential. So this week we were going to run with the VC Stewart into the captain of Bont. So Stewart has that Richmond game, and as I was saying, I think it's going to be quite a good matchup for him. And he's been a bit down lately, so hopefully there's a bit of a spike score coming here. And Bontempelli's just Bontempelli. It doesn't look like anyone's been able to stop him lately, and we're just going to roll on that wave. And the only other thing I missed was the 3-2-1 for last round, so we're going to do that quickly. So the 3 is going to Jack Siebel because that 179 is ridiculous, and it was great to watch, and we're just going to run with that because it was a great score, and it was a real cherry on top for a decent week. Bont's getting the 2 vote, 164 captain, can't ask for much more than that. And the 1 vote's going to go to JHF for finally being able to get a game together where he wasn't, wasteful with the ball and putting up 109, and the cash is going back up again, and that's all we can ask from him. And you know what? I think he might be held as a keeper in this team. I think I'm not going to look to trade him till a long time in. I think it's a luxury most other teams won't have, but I think in this one we can hold him. I think honestly, I think he will outdo Will Day. I just think that Port have a decent run. He's starting to get the ball together. Okay, it was always going to be hard to come into a team and play well straight away, and he did have that amazing first game against Brisbane, but there's been a lot of pressure on him, and I think he's finally putting the games together. The disposals have been there. It's just been getting that kicking efficiency, and I think he's getting more comfortable. The players are getting around him, and I think he could be ready to have a nice back end. So that is it for me. Anyway, I hope everyone here's got something out of this video. If you got to the end, congratulations. You are now my favorite viewer. As I always say, if you give us a like and subscribe, that would be great. Subscribing costs you nothing, liking costs you nothing, and it really helps us with our, seeing how we're doing, if people are really valuing the content. I know that this is a bit different to your normal team, but it's still something interesting to see and how this kind of will build out to the end. I think this is going to be more interesting to see once it starts to evolve over the buys rather than right now. So yeah. Hopefully you can just subscribe, jump on, join the ride, and I still talk about players that are relevant a lot of the time. So you'll still be able to gain a little bit of insight, and leave a comment down the bottom if you want a question answered, because I'm happy to do it. I've done it plenty already, and I will continue to do it as we go forward. So anyway, good luck for the weekend. Hope you will score better than me, because if you don't, you've got some work to do. Just kidding. We'll have bad weeks. I've had plenty of them in SuperCoach. So we'll see you next time, and cheers.